The evolution of a series in 3D is usually quite easy to follow. Take something like Super Mario for instance. From Super Mario 64 up to Super Mario 3D World, the focus was clearly on making the game just tightly designed as possible, so focus on whatever gimmicks each new game would introduce. Sonic the Hedgehog, however, is another story entirely. With so many different gameplay styles and gimmicks over the years, it can be hard to see a clear evolution in terms of level design. So today, we're going to be going over each opening level in 3D Sonic, trying to understand what the designers were going for in each game, and determining which of these approaches is the best one. Without further ado, let's get into things. Sonic Adventure was in a weird spot when releasing, as it had to push the series forward while also making veterans feel at home. And while it did innovate quite a bit, the team made a wise decision to keep the aesthetic of the classic Sonic games intact for the first stage of 3D Sonic. And that wasn't the only thing they kept intact in those games too, as all of the hallmarks of classic Sonic design were there and accounted for. Higher powers being the fastest but requiring skill to stay on, and lower powers being an easier time but much slower. In many ways, this stage feels like an evolution of what came before it, with the level design principles of Sonic 3 and the aesthetic of Sonic 1 and 2. Sonic didn't struggle with their transition to 3D, he thrived. Sea Escape on the other hand went for a way different approach fundamentally. Instead of trying to translate the design philosophy of the classics in 3D, the level instead does its best to feel like a playable cutscene, and it follows the intro to a hero story where Sonic is on the run from the military for unknown reasons. As a result of this design, there's much less room for experimentation compared to Emerald Coast, as the game wants you to follow a single path stylishly. However, because of the linearity and the synergy between cutscene and level, this might be the best opening sequence in the entire series, as it shows just how outclassed the military really is up against the fastest thing alive. In complete contrast to what Adventure 2 built up to, Sonic Heroes decided to go back to how things were in the classics, where level themes didn't necessarily correlate to the story. And for this game, which was meant to be a soft reboot in terms of storytelling, I think it works out rather well. What I love about the level is how it rewards multiple types of player, a complete contrast to Sea Escape, which you could only really get the most out of by playing in the way the developers intended. Seaside Hill on the other hand rewards both the speedrunner looking to take advantage of the game's rich mechanics, and the explosive types who get a kick out of finding hidden secrets. It's a brilliant level that sets the stage for what is, in my humble opinion anyway, Sonic's greatest adventure, period. Once again, we have a new 3D Sonic game with a completely different level design approach to the previous ones. At first glance, you may view Westopolis as a basic ass level when going through it regularly because it is. But that's by design, as the true purpose of this level existing is to introduce the main gimmick of Shadow the Hedgehog, which is the open mission structure. Depending on what allegiance you side with, you can either go to the goal ring and be neutral, kill all the aliens to be good, or say fuck them humans and kill them all to align yourself with Black Doom. And the traditional Sonic stage design-wise wouldn't make this feasible, so they made Westopolis as simple as possible to make other objectives easier, despite not really accomplishing that. While striking visually, this level is probably the first one on the list to just be alright from a design perspective in my opinion. However, it's the opening level of my biggest guilty pleasure game in the series, so it kinda gets a pass in my books. 06 is the first game to feel like it's trying to iterate on past 3D games in terms of design, keeping the openness of Sonic Heroes and Adventure 1 while having sections of scripted high-speed action like Adventure 2. And I'd say it works pretty damn well, with a blend of platforming, open-ended design, and speed that I'm sure any fan of the series will appreciate. On paper. 06 sucking on a fundamental basis pretty much makes everything I've mentioned above a moot point, as players judge the game off the final product and not the intent. It's that intent, however, that makes 06 such an interesting case, with several fans attempting to fully realise the potential that game had. The most famous example of this is obviously P06, which turns 06 from one of the worst games in the series to being able to compete with the big dogs. And I think that's what makes Wave Ocean, and 06 as a whole, pretty unique. After 06 crashed and burned, Sonic Team wanted to take Sonic in a new direction, which we know today as the Boost formula. Since 2008, this has been the primary gameplay style Sonic games have used, and yet, in spite of that, Unleashed somehow manages to have one of the strongest implementations of this gameplay style in the series, with Windmill Isle being the perfect example of what they're going for. Much like Adventure 2, the stage design of Unleashed is quite linear, with the focus being on high-speed antics. Unlike that game however, speed is given to you constantly through the boost, and the challenge comes from maintaining it through reacting to obstacles as they come. And while shallower than Adventure 1 and Heroes from a mechanical standpoint, it works amazingly well because the game design takes full advantage of Sonic's moveset. Windmill Owl succeeds as a first level because of that, as it's easy for newcomers to pick up and play, but satisfying to speed through as someone who's mastered the game. Deciding to learn from their mistakes for once, Sonic Team decided to flesh out the daytime Sonic experience from Unleashed and make a whole game around it. But despite using a lot of the framework Unleashed laid out, in many ways Sonic Colors is its own beast. The biggest difference between it and Unleashed is the limited amount of ways to attain boost, as you can only get it through boost capsules and specific enemies. As a result of this change however, these levels encourage exploration way more with the introduction of red rings. And while a first playthrough of Tropical Resort may seem much simpler on the first run through without the wisps, coming back to it later and going through the red rings reveals so much more to the level that you wouldn't usually see, and is in fact encouraged in order to get higher ranks. It should also be noted that originally, Acts 1 and 2 of this stage were meant to be a single level in development, before the team decided to split them up in an attempt to pad out the game length. And while I think both levels on their own are fine enough, playing them together just feels so much better. If you want to experience Colors in its intended format, I recommend taking a look at the Act Restoration mod, which aims to deliver an experience more akin to Unleashed with lengthier levels. On the whole though, Colors delivers a unique flavour to the boost formula fans love from Unleashed, while introducing elements that future games will build off of. Speaking of game building of future elements, Generations combines the reaction-based gameplay of Unleashed with the more explorative and open elements of Colors, and the result, as many people can attest to, is one of the best opening stages in Sonic history, as it pays respect to a level it started all 35 years ago. What strikes me the most about this level is how they made something so easy to pick up for casual players, yet so thrilling and engaging to veterans. It also sets the stage for what's one of the most universally acclaimed Sonic games ever, with each future stage building upon the foundation set here. To many, this was when Sonic game design peaked. In typical Sonic Team fashion, they decided to ignore the endless praise half of Unleashed, Colors and Generations got in favour of the Super Mario Galaxy clone in Sonic Lost World, and Windy Hero in many ways highlights a lot of the shortcomings of Lost World's approach. For one, the level does a rather poor job of teaching you the main mechanics of the game. This is an issue that's plagued the Sonic series for quite a while, but the first levels of prior games at least got you familiar with the basics of how things worked. Here on the other hand, the only way to find out what you can do is through experimentation, which is bound to leave a bad taste in players' mouths on the first time playthrough. And while I do like the game to an extent, mainly due to the speedrunning aspect, I can see why so many Sonic fans consider it mediocre upon their first playthrough, as it opens rather mundanely. And now we're getting to what is, in my humble opinion, the worst opening level in all of 3D Sonic. There's an attempt at putting in some alternate pathways, but they don't matter at all, as they're either horribly insignificant to the gameplay experience or flat out hinder it with huge chunks of automation where you don't have to press anything. It doesn't even do the playable cutscene thing well either, as the level feels completely disconnected from the opening cutscene of the game, which has Eggman monologuing in its base. There is an attempt at telling a story through the visuals with the landscape becoming sandy as you approach the end, but it just falls flat from a visual standpoint and there's nothing interesting about it. And in many ways, this level is a representation of what comes ahead. A soulless game devoid of any creativity, identity, or ambition. In retrospect, I kinda see what they wanted to do with the cyberspace stages of Frontiers, trying to evoke a sense of familiarity while keeping things fresh with the spherical changes. Unfortunately, the cracks appear as early as the first stage, as it feels nowhere near as good to traverse the levels as it does in other games with bare boost mechanics. So in spite of the mostly solid level design, everything good about this level is done 100 times better in Unleashed, and while cyberspace is ultimately a small portion of what's otherwise a really good game in my opinion, it's so depressing to see these old levels get bastardized with this half-assed take on the boost formula. After 13 years, Sonic Team actually decided to get their shit together and build upon the foundation of Sonic Generations with its expansion, Shadow Generations. However, a major difference is them de-emphasizing the more reaction-based attributes of that game, with things like the slide and quick-step taking a backseat. The second difference is that the game attempts to capture the playable cutscene vibe we haven't seen since SA2, with mid-level cutscenes and dialogue being introduced into the stage halfway through. And it does an excellent job of making you wonder what's up with Black Doom and his return, just like Sonic's escapade throughout the sea in SAE2 made you wonder who framed him. The stage also tells a story in a way, as Shadow begins it wanting to follow the strange energy he felt on the Ark and ends it with a new objective, being to apprehend Black Doom. On the whole, this is one of the stronger opening levels in the series without a doubt. Opening levels in Sonic have always set the tone for the world of each game, being a snapshot of where Sonic was and highlighting how the series evolved, and devolved in some cases, over time. But with all that being said, it begs the question, what makes a Sonic intro level good? To me, the answer is fairly simple. A great intro level sets the tone for the game through its atmosphere, visuals and storytelling like Adventure 2 and Shadow Gens. However, it should also captivate the player with level design that stays true to the time attack nature of Sonic while offering multiple ways to approach him, like Adventure 1, Heroes and 06. And with Frontiers 2 reportedly in development, I can only hope that they continue down the path Shadow Generation set us upon for its side space levels, expanding on what worked while removing the shit that didn't.